Good evening, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So, in today's video, or this evening's video, thank you for joining in on this late live stream video. We are going to be talking about the real estate market and how the inequality is viewed in no better fashion than to watch the separation take place within the real estate market. Now, I came across this video, I think this is out of Fox News, talking with a gentleman who is saying how the real estate market is not going to get any better until interest rates go down, and even when they do, that's not going to necessarily create the economic environment that we are all hoping for. And I'm going to discuss that here in just a minute. Now, let me play this for you.
But Jeff Seeker is with us, and he's going to sort things out for us. Jeff, what impact from last week's rate cuts, and maybe more rate cuts to come, on housing affordability? Will it make any difference?
Stuart, I said last week on your show that 25 basis points was expected, but it was going to have very little impact. And yes, I think it's going to have a 25 basis point cut has very little impact. Here you have mortgage rates up from 50 to 70% from 2022. This is just a drop in the bucket. And the whole drive behind making housing more affordable involves creating more supply. And creating more supply involves construction, and construction involves borrowing. Borrowing costs are too high to build the...
I think that's probably one of the key things to understand right there. Borrowing costs are too high for people to go out there and borrow the money to start the new projects. Now, when we internalize that information right there, it makes it very difficult to then understand what it is that we need to do in order to conduct ourselves, because it's going to take well over a year and a half to even get any kind of idea of getting a project off the ground. See, lowering interest rates isn't going to go into the real estate market in any kind of fashion unless it's significant. See, like just a little bit better might get a few people to join in on the idea that the interest rates might be slightly better for them and a little bit better than they were before, and it might entice them to go ahead and do the project. But to actually bring people to the game, say, hey, these interest rates are so good that I'm going to jump in and start these projects, that is nowhere near what it is that's taking place today, and there is no expectation of that happening anytime in the future. So when you think about starting a project, like when you go to build a home, the logistics that go into it are quite significant. If you're ready to play the game, like if you got subcontractors lined up, if you got financing lined up, if you got permitting and ready to go, you got all the land prepped, you are in a position in which that you can fire off the project and pull the trigger and go for it. That is very rare. Most people never ever have the ability to start a project just simply by just waving a magic wand and saying go, right? Most of the time, it comes under a lot of planning and setting up logistics and trying to get contractors lined up, getting bids lined up, getting financing lined up, and all that takes a very long time when it comes to starting a new project. So even the lowering of interest rates isn't going to bring in any kind of housing inventory from new construction in the way that a lot of people would anticipate when the Federal Reserve goes to lower rates. Like even this gentleman is saying it. Let's hear what he has to say.
Homes that are needed. So I think until the Fed gets serious and cuts rates more dramatically, I think we're going to continue to have this affordability crisis. And if you look at the 10-year Treasury, the 10-year Treasury is showing us something. Prices down, yields up. That's showing us that this has been no effect whatsoever.
Yeah, look at that, 4.14 on the 10-year Treasury. Last week we were down around 4% even. Not a good signal for mortgage rates, which I think is still around 6.3%, I believe now, the 30-year fix. You need it below than that.
So what they're saying is that the Federal Reserve lowered rates, but yet interest rates seem to move up on account of that. Right? And that doesn't seem to be a sign of easing into the economy, but yet more restriction. And this is the unfortunate circumstances that we now live in. See, I don't know what it is that people are expecting to come from a Federal Reserve lowering of interest rates. But when they were in a low interest rate environment, it seemed to me that the real estate market was quite elevated. And everybody was talking about how it was too hot and it was going to pop. And then what happened? The Federal Reserve increased interest rates and the real estate market went up even more. It wasn't until now, with the idea that there is recession or the credible threat of recession, whether that's due to credible threats of tariffs or just economic slowdown in general, the real estate market has done nothing but move up the entire time. And even now, it's just stagnating and maybe dropping in some areas, but not dropping so significantly that it now is affordable, right? See, it's not going to get affordable. There's nothing that can be done to bring it affordable. If you were to bring new inventory, it's going to be years down the road before new inventory shows up. And if you're thinking about having a better interest rate environment to buy a house, anytime the lowering of interest rates takes place, the increase in the asset price goes up. Even when they lower interest rates or raise interest rates, the asset price goes up. It's only the credible threat of a recession or an actual recession that's going to bring the housing prices down. And I just don't believe that's going to take place now that they don't focus in on 80% of the people to do consumption, but they only need 20% of the people to do consumption. And if the 20% of the people can do consumption, that then shows up in the numbers that say, hey, we got a consumer who happens to be here keeping the economy looking good, but yet 80% of the people are going, man, why does this seem so tough out here where our jobs and our wages just don't seem to keep up, right? Well, Cantillon effect. Like at the end of the day, you can just go and look at the essay written hundreds of years ago that talk about this very situation. Okay. Cantillon said this: I know no better measure than the leases and rents of property owners to judge the abundance and scarcity of money in circulation. When land is leased at high rates, it is a sign that there is plenty of money in the state. But when land has to be leased at much lower rates, it shows, other things being equal, that money is scarce. He says, I have read in the state of France that acres of vineyards near Mantes, not far from the French capital, which lease for 200 livres turounies, I don't know what these weights are, or these measurements of currency, for the full weight in 1660, only leased for 100 of the lighter money in the 1700s. However, the silver brought from the West Indies in the interval should naturally have raised the price of land in Europe. I know no better measure than the lease and rents of property owners to judge the abundance and scarcity of money in circulation. You know, that's just the sign of the times. When you have this much increase of money and debt that has been pushed into the system, and you think about what it is that people do with their money when they get a hold of it, most of the time you are going to find that the poor or the less fortunate or the people who are struggling at the end of the line will not put that money into good use, but will then take that money and put it towards something that gives them a pleasurable experience, removes them a moment away from the pain that they are suffering through in order to somewhat feel comfortable or enjoy a moment of their experience in this world of life. When they do that, the money goes right to the top. The rich will always get richer if you put new money into the system. It happens every single time. And there is really no better measure than the rents and leases of the property owners. See, this is why I don't go and try and think about ways you can fix the system. There's nothing that you can do. You know, you can lower interest rates right now. Do you think that's going to make the asset price go up or down? Right? Most likely it's going to go up. You lower the interest rates, people start borrowing that money, they go out and start participating in the purchasing of homes. That's demand. Lower interest rates, you increase demand. But if you don't lower interest rates, you can't bring new inventory. If you don't bring new inventory, then you're not going to be able to lower the prices of the homes out there, because the demand for homes is always going to be present no matter what, because there's always going to be somebody out there who has the money to buy it. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that the price is going to be elevated because the person who has the money is willing to buy it, but the person who's willing to buy it has plenty of money because there's an abundance of money in the system. And that's the reason why most of the people can't find a job that is going to be able to provide them with the ability to buy that house, is because of the separation that has taken place in the massive amounts of concentration of wealth to the top. Doesn't give the ability of a day job or an average job or even a good job to be able to participate inside of that real estate market. Again, there is no better measure than the leases and rents of property owners to judge the abundance of scarcity of money in circulation. It's sad to see it take place, but then once you understand it, once you recognize it for what it is, now you can actually do something about it. See, I think all the time when I live inside of an area of not only like price increases that seem so dramatic. Like, I remember being a kid growing up in this area of this corner of Oregon. It was a working community. Logging and fishing, that was the main income. Well, if you have logging and fishing, that is the main income for the people here, how much do you think the houses are going to cost? They're going to cost as much as the fishing and logging can provide the people to buy the homes. But now if you have retirement community and you have remote workers and you have hospital district that is moving in dramatic fashion and they're coming in, how is it that the average day job is going to compete against those people when they used to compete against logging and fishing? See, logging and fishing was great jobs. They paid very well, but they weren't so high paying that it caused the rest of the people who were working in the community to be priced out of the game. But now if you have tons of remote workers, you have tons of retirement community, you have a bunch of, hospital district workers who are now moving into the area and they have the money to drive up the prices, what happens to the average everyday worker? They're priced out of the game. This is what's happening in my area, and I recognize it for what it is. I don't get mad at it. What is it to be done? I mean, there's only so many homes around here, and although they would love to build homes, there's only so many places that a home can be built. You think about it, the infrastructure has to be able to provide for the sewer systems, the water systems, to be able to provide all the infrastructure and demand for a population. Well, I think about what I see taking place here in Astoria, and it's not surprising when I find the hospital district growing as much as it is. You have to understand, we had a hospital that was reasonable to the size of Astoria, and now Astoria is becoming a giant hospital, right? It's huge. There's medical districts everywhere, all over the place, and I keep wondering why, and I think, probably because this is going to become a retirement community. And they are going to need all these medical facilities to support all the retired people that are going to be here, because that's what's coming next. Right? It's pretty obvious. I don't question, why it's happening. I don't get mad about it. I just know that it's happening. And I know that there was a time in which that the average everyday day job person could go out there and buy a chunk of land and slowly piece together themselves a house with very limited skills. Think about the abundance of homes that could come from a people who are in a condition such as that. That wasn't that long ago. Like literally a guy working at a gas station who had a small chunk of land could buy 2x4s on the way home after work, piece together himself a house over the course of a year or whatever it took him to do it. And it didn't have to be anything fancy, and people would kind of expect that to be somewhat of the case for a lot of homes out there. And although those sort of things can happen today, they really don't. What I see is how it is that these big time nationwide home builders are building shoddy homes for people to live in. And I think to myself, man, I wonder how long these homes will last if they're trying to increase inventory. I mean, how many years are they going to be able to get out of some of these homes? You know, I live in an area that has homes that were built 100 years ago, still standing today. The boards that were built that they were built from are old growth fir boards that have a natural rot resistance. Even if they were to leak, they have to leak for decades before it finally starts to rot to the point that you have to tear it all apart. These things are tough. 100 years ago they were put together. The lumber today doesn't have that same quality. You can't put a house together and have it in the same. You can't put a house together the way that they used to with today's materials and expect it to last like it did. You have to be very, very precise in the way that you put homes together nowadays in order for them to be of any kind of quality of lasting. Not saying it can't be done, but it has to be done correctly. Back in the day, just having the correct material and was a huge difference inside of the quality of the home. Right? Because having that high quality lumber that was everlasting, you know, in the sense that, you know, it's time proven. I think about the housing market and the unfortunateness that people are going to be facing going into the future. You know, this is one of the things that I worry about for my kids, you know, especially for my kids, thinking about how it is that the Cantillon essay describes what ends up taking place when the new money eventually turns off. Well, if they don't turn off the new money, the inequality is going to get worse. If they turn off the new money, everybody falls into pain and misery. This doesn't look good. There's no better sign of it than to look at the real estate market. Okay? You can see how difficult it is for the average everyday person to go out there and get a house when there was a time when it was almost expected that people with a steady job or even a decent job would totally have the ability to do it. Yeah. I was reading an article about what used to be an job that was like it was understood that if you had certain jobs, then you had a job that would qualify to buy a house, you know, like being a teacher or what was it, being a factory worker, being a construction worker. I don't know. It had a few of these. It had a list of a few of these things, and I'm thinking, no, those jobs ain't going to do it no more, you know, and not like they used to. Maybe in some areas. You know, it's sad to see it. I like this quote, this part of the essay. It talks about when the state has arrived at its highest point of wealth, and I always assume that the comparative wealth of the state consists mainly in their represented respective quantities of money, it will inevitably fall back into poverty by the ordinary course of things. The too great of abundance of money, which gives power to the state so long as it lasts, throws them back imperceptibly, man, I just can't say words, but naturally into poverty. Thus, it would seem that when a state expands by trade and the abundance of money raises the price of land and labor, the prince or the legislator ought to withdraw the money from circulation, keep it for emergencies, and try to slow down its circulation by every means, except compulsion and bad faith, to prevent its goods from becoming too expensive and avoid the drawbacks of luxury. I don't know how many people have thought about that, what that really means. To slow down the circulation by every means except compulsion and bad faith, to prevent its goods from becoming too expensive and avoid the drawbacks of luxury. Right? See, this is the problem we face, is that when we were a manufacturing state and we produced the world's greatest goods, we sent those goods out there to the world and the world sent us their gold. What do you think would happen here in the United States if we had all the gold coming to us from all the wonderful products that we were making and pushing out there? We would raise our standard of living. That would push the circulation of money. And when you start pushing that circulation of money, the goods start to become expensive. And when those goods become expensive, foreign production starts to come in. It was literally the move into luxury that did it. Right? To prevent its goods from becoming too expensive and avoid the drawbacks of luxuries. It is not easy to perceive the opportune time for this, or to know when money has become more abundant than it ought to be, for the good and the preservation of the advantages of the state. Therefore, princes and heads of republics do not concern themselves much with this sort of knowledge, and strive only to make use of the abundance of their state revenues, to extend their power, and to insult other countries on the most frivolous of pretexts. All things considered, working to perpetuate their glory of their reigns and administrations, and to leave monuments of their power and wealth, is perhaps the best that they can do, because according to the natural course of humanity, the state must collapse on its own. They only accelerate its fall a little. Nevertheless, it seems that they should try to make the power last during their time of their own administration. They don't concern themselves with that sort of knowledge. Not then, not now. Right? The legislator, the administrations, they don't concern themselves with this sort of knowledge. They only try to make, with this sort of power, they only strive to make use of the abundance of their state revenues to extend their power and to insult other countries. Right? Some things just never change. I mean, he wrote this hundreds of years ago, right? So when people are like, oh man, this is like, crazy what they're doing nowadays. Look at what the politicians are up to. And I'm like, this is not anything new. This is the way that they have been doing it for a very long time, and it's ultimately a symptom of the abundance of money that is poured into the system. This is what they do. They act this way, and eventually the new money will turn off, and we all, fall into poverty and misery. Hey Simon, look at Clatsop County Historic Society magazine on the Internet Archive called Cumtux, including old ads for builders' plans for those old Astoria homes. Oh, that's cool. That'd be interesting. Sounds like New York City at the moment. You remember Blockbuster Video? Yeah, I remember Blockbuster Vid. In fact, there was one left. I don't know. Is it still operating in Oregon? We actually have a rental. We have a Video Horizon, and it's a video rental store here in Astoria. It's still up in operation. Boomers rode the wave well, but it's coming to an end. Now their children's children have to pay the bill. Yeah, millennial diligence. I mean, I guess, like, they rode the wave well. Like, it's almost like they created the situation for us to suffer in, or something like that. It was their timing. It just happened to be in that timing of the whole cycle, right? And so to blame boomers, it was the boomers who did it and now the children have to suffer. I don't know if that's necessarily what you were saying, but that's kind of like, a common talk out there, is that you hear something of that nature. And I think to myself, well, no, like, they're not to blame. There's just the way it was. If you work really hard and you take that hard work and you enjoy it, you will create the Cantillon effect. It's the move into luxuries, and you can't stop people from doing it. Like, that's why it's a cycle. It's like cyclical, and you can't blame anybody or anything. You can't blame greed. You can't blame manipulation. You can't blame any of that stuff. I mean, you can blame it. Who am I to tell you what to do? But the idea of blaming that stuff is then disconnecting yourself, or at least removing the idea that it's a cyclical thing, right? You have all these things that you blame. You blame the politicians, you blame the greed, you blame the corporations, you blame all these things out there, and you say, no, just look, it's this right here. And got all these symptoms that are there, basically coming from the abundance of new money that has poured into the system. So it's not that, it's the abundance of money that has given these people the ability to do that. And now to think, well, maybe we can create a theory or an idea that these people won't behave like they do with a bunch of new money. And that is really where I find it very comical, because people don't do the right thing, right? They don't do the right thing. Because when you work hard and you have acquired that new money, what is the last thing you're going to do? Is go and just take all that new money that you have received and just go and throw it to the less fortunate than you? Like, you go and you worked hard, you got a raise, you took that raise, cut back on your expenses, got a bunch of savings, and you go down one day and you take all your savings out and you just go and say, there you go. Look at all the hard work I just given you. Aren't you guys happy with me? Right? Everybody's going to benefit from this. Like, is that a mindset of the people? Absolutely not. That is not how it is that human behavior works. Human behavior says, I worked hard, I've acquired it, this is mine, I'm elevating my standard of living so that I can be more comfortable with my experience. That is what humans do, right? So this is the exact thing that creates the inequality that we now face. So because if you take in a bunch of new money from all the hard work and experience that you have, provided to the world, the services, the skills, the products, whatever it is that you have gotten out there, and you have gotten abundance of money from it, and you take that money and you elevate your standard of living, you are going and diving into luxuries. You're getting a better couch, you're getting a better apartment, you're getting a better car, you're getting better clothes, whatever. All that right there is the move that starts to create the inequality. Now, if it was an idea that you weren't going to do that and take all that money and start moving it into investments into business, investments into, the stock market, investment into real estate, investment into these other things, you're still going to end up separating yourself from the poor. Right? Because those assets start to increase. And again, we start finding situations like we have now. House prices are elevated, stock market is elevated. No matter what, if you have new money that comes into the system, you are going to find people who behave inappropriately, whatever that means, right? In that sense, to me, would be spending it on good times, spending it on toys, spending it on, and whatever it is out there that this doesn't have any kind of return to it. And then you have the appropriate method, and that is to put it into something that is going to have some sort of return. Dividend paying stocks, rental properties, an asset like gold and silver, something that is going to be a position in which that you feel that is going to be worth more going into the future, or at least have some sort of return on it that has like a business idea behind it, or rent behind it, or a dividend behind it, or a yield behind it, or something like that nature. These are the two directions, the two different mindsets that people go. So the new money that comes in will always separate the rich from the poor, no matter what, right? You throw a bunch of new money into it, some people are going to act in a way that says, hey, woohoo, good times, and they will fall to the bottom of the line. And then you got other people who say, I'm not going to good times, but I'm going to deploy this money so that I get a return from it. And then this is where where the inequality comes from. People get upset about that. I don't get why. I mean, it is a bummer, because we are in part of the system that has been stretched on for so long that now the inequality is just like way out of proportion here. But ultimately, it's not like people didn't have their chance. Like by the time I figured it out, I'm 40 years old. Like my chances of being able to acquire any kind of massive amounts of wealth is probably pretty slim comparatively to what I could have done if I had started when I was 20. Right? Like here, I'm almost 50 years old, and I have very little chance of being able to use compounding interest in order to acquire some sort of abundance in my life just simply by being steady into an interest bearing account. Like just doing something very simple like that is really only available to the youth. Right? So by the time, again, people figure it out, it's too late. But when you're young, when you get new money, I mean, I see it, when the kids get, money, what do they want to buy? Video games and candy and, whatever. It was just like they want to buy pleasurable things because that's what they associate with it. It was just like money buys pleasurable things. But it's very difficult to say, hey, money buys a security into the future and a return on investment, right? I mean, even Cantillon talks about it in his essay. Let me see if I can find it. It's in. Let me see if I can figure out where it's at in here, because he talks about how it is that. Oops. Let me see. Yeah, here we go. The industrious people who are eager to acquire property. See, now this is it. Like, this is the same thing no matter what. Like, this goes back hundreds of years, and today this still holds true, right? This, I mean, this has never changed, right? This is how it goes. The industrious people who are eager to acquire property will not at first increase their expenditures, right? They won't dive into luxuries. They'll hold back. They will not at first increase their expenditures. They will wait until they have accumulated large sums from which that they can draw a secure interest of income independent of their occupation. Once a large number of inhabitants have acquired considerable fortunes from this money, which enters the state regularly and annually, they will not fail to increase their consumption and raise the price of everything. This is the situation we're in. There was plenty of people who had waited, held back on their expenditures so that they could buy into a secure rate, or a secure, how does he put it? Accumulated large sums so that they can draw a secure interest of income independent of their occupation. Right? The people who do this are on the other side of the wedge. They were disciplined, they waited, they were very, motivated in what it is that they were doing, so they cut back on their expenses so that they could position themselves in this way. Right? Once a large number of inhabitants have acquired considerable fortunes from this money, which enters the state regularly and annually, they will not fail to increase their consumption and raise the prices of everything. Although these higher prices result in greater expenditures than they first contemplated, they will, for the most part, continue so long as the capital lasts. So the money starts to come in, they start increasing their consumption, the prices start to move up, and it's more than they would have liked. But you know what? They got new money. So, even if the prices are up, hey, we got to spend the money, all right, if we want the stuff. They will continue so long as the capital lasts. For nothing is easier and more pleasant than to increase a family's expenditures. And nothing is more difficult or unpleasant than to decrease them. So increasing the standard of living is awesome. The moment that we go the other way, it's pain and suffering. Let me go check out some of these super chats here. Thank you, everybody who's joined in on today's live stream. We've got 190 people watching. Millennial Diligence, thank you so much for the 1999. Thank you for the response, Simon. Great channel. Well, thank you so much, Millennial Diligence, for the support for the channel with the 1999 super chat. Very kind of you. Johnny Midas, thank you so much for the $20. Thanks for creating a quality open forum, Simon. Yeah, you bet, guys. This is the point of the channel, is so that you can understand what it is that you need to do. This is the research that we have done, the understanding of the underlying economic forces. The way it is that we have internalized this understanding of these economic forces is unique to every single one of us individually. We will never be able to understand it if we did not have this discussion. If we did not take in the idea of what it is that has been presented in this video, and then we think about it, and then use this information in our daily lives, this is how it is that we are going to figure out what it is that we need to do, considering the cycle and the times that we are in. There's nothing we can do to stop. The rich people who are out there are going to be stupid rich in the future. Like, it's just, if they wasn't already ridiculous now, it is going to be stupid, ridiculous, unfathomable going into the future, because the idea of how much money needs to be made, created, in order to continue on with the system and in operations in the way it is being done, right? If it doesn't happen, the pain and misery that follows from it will be extraordinary. There is nothing fortunate to look forward to. I don't mean to be like so doomsday, like negative on the situation, but there really isn't. The inequality is either going to get incredibly incredibly worse, right? Or the money is going to turn off, and the problems that we face are going to be in overwhelmingly bad. Like, I don't know how to put it, but it's just like neither scenario is going to be something that you want to be in. So understand, like, the system is probably going to continue down this path where the inequality is going to continue to grow. And then know that you can position yourself to at least take some sort of advantage of it, so you don't end up on the bottom side, or at least suffering in such consequences because of the amount of inequality that is actually going to take place. I mean, if you can position yourself to deal with it, you don't have to necessarily make yourself like, the richest person in the world, but you can deal with the situation, right? All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. We got 183 people watching. The people will not stand for BS. They will. They do it all the time. An individual might not. Like, an individual person and a group of individuals might not. But the people themselves are very, very naive. And it really probably won't do anything. Thanks, UE. Yeah, you bet, MLB. I appreciate you guys being here. Walrus, I had pleasurable experiences today with some good barbecue. All right on. I don't feel guilty because I never eat barbecue. Well, good for you. I felt good today because what did I do today? I actually worked on my house and enjoyed it by listening to some music and finally fixed the gutters properly. Last time old Nida was over, he looked and he says, yeah, man, you still haven't fixed your gutters. So I got my gutters all fixed. I got my patio cleaned up, put a bunch of stuff away for, getting ready for winter time because it's going to start raining. And I felt pretty good about all that, and did a little grocery shopping on top of it all. All right, millennial hug a boomer. We need love because we have all the wealth, and Beatles said money can't buy me love. Yeah. The Beatles were pretty interesting. I went back and I listened to a lot of Beatles, and it's pretty interesting, some of the lyrics that they had. Like, you think about some of the things that they talk about now in music, and people are like, oh man, it's so disgusting, some of the topics that they bring up. And I think to myself, yeah, but it's not like they weren't talking about this stuff way back in the day either. Like, they just kind of had it in a way that wasn't like necessarily in your face like it is today, but it was still there. Like, you know, like what about the Beatles song, Things Are Getting Better, right? How do the lyrics go? I used to be cruel to my woman. I beat her and kept her apart from the things that she loved. Man, I was mean, but I'm changing my scene. I'm doing the best that I can. Things are getting better all the time, right? I mean, you think about it, man. That was like way back in the day. Straight up, like said it. Yeah? I used to beat my woman. That's what he said. Man, I was mean, changing my scene. Kept her apart from the things that she loved. Weird stuff. But, good old Beatles. All right. Do you see the top biggest corporations controlling everything from food to housing to energy for the whole population, at least to the 80%? Well, yeah. And I'm right, 77. That seems to be 777. That seems to be like the general path in which that it's going towards anyway. Like corporations, it all comes down to profit, right? So if it was profitable to do it any other way, then they would. All right. So understanding like the amount of food that has to be created in order to feed this population in the way that it does has to come from corporate commercial farming and massive production of it. Now, when I think about the massive production of food that takes place in the commercial, like even just commercially grown poultry, chickens, the disgusting environment in which that these chickens have to be raised, and the like almost the unfair creation of the animal within itself in order to feed us, because this is like it's a terminal breed. It's not something that would ever exist. It's a hybrid animal. Now a lot of people will say, oh, it's GMO and all this like other stuff. Okay, no, it's not, right? They developed this chicken way back in the day before all the genetically modified stuff. And it's a hybrid bird that was basically created during the Great Depression in the war effort. I mean, it took time, but ultimately they went to breeders and they said, hey, we want a particular bird. We want it to look like this and we need it to grow fast. And so the breeders got together and they figured it out and they came up with the Cornish cross rock. And there's a few other variations of it, but ultimately they were able to combine a breeding method to create a bird that would grow very fast with a lot of meat content to it. And so now these birds still exist today and they've gotten better and better at it. So people say, oh, they're like these GMO and all this other stuff. Okay. Like I'd imagine there's probably some of that taking place somewhere out there, but most of what it is that we are eating out there came from this creation of this bird through breeding techniques. Now, I've raised these birds myself, and they grow very fast. When you get them to about 6 weeks old, they start eating and drinking like you wouldn't believe. And over the course of the next 2 weeks, from 6 weeks to 8 weeks, they go from like being a 2 pound bird to an 8 pound bird. And it's just unreal. You can like practically watch them grow. And it's just incredible to see. If these birds didn't exist, then the people wouldn't be eating, right? They just like think about that. They can raise these birds from the time they hatch out of an egg to the time that they are ready to be butchered is 8 weeks, right? 8 weeks it takes to do this. That's incredible to think. The amount of effort that it takes in order to raise these birds, to create this to create this system so that everybody can have an abundance of food to eat, I can imagine is incredibly fragile. Right? Now, if you had everybody who was producing the majority of their food for themselves, like it may not be the greatest food in the world, it may not, like as far as like the variety goes, You know, it might be like the same kind of thing over and over again because, you know, you're only going to have so much that you can do for yourself. There's only so much that you can get from the people around you. But if this was the case where you had more people who were providing their own food, then that would be a very secure system. It wouldn't be it wouldn't be fragile, right? But now, if you are an economy that has an abundance of money in it, well, that abundance of money doesn't necessarily give you the ability to have like a need to grow your own food when you can just simply buy it. Like, if you could just put in a little bit of effort and get all the food you need, why would you take out all your effort to provide the food that you need? You see what I'm saying? Like, if you spend all day gardening and so that you could eat, when you could just go and spend, like, say, an hour of work and provide yourself with all the food that you need, which one are you going to do? Well, that's the United States, essentially. We buy all our needs from other nations because we have this abundance of money. Let me go and check out some of these super chats before I forget about them. Thank you guys, everybody, for being here, for participating. We got 165 people watching, 67 likes. Thank you so much for hitting that like button and all these wonderful super chats. You guys support the channel. I just can never thank you enough. Top 3 books for getting us up to speed on long-term investing. Thanks for the show, sir. Millennial Diligence. Thank you so much again for the $4.99. I'm gonna give you. Okay, here's what's really interesting about it. All my studies, everything that I've ever really done as far as understanding the economy, learning about monetary policy, everything, I didn't learn from books. I didn't learn it from reading books. I learned it from reading essays. I learned it from listening to lectures. I've learned it from listening to massive amounts of different economists out there giving their opinions. And ultimately, I learned it by asking Google questions. What is? What is a mortgage-backed security? What is a credit default swap? What is? What is? What is? What is fractional reserve banking? Right? I kept asking over and over again, and I never stopped asking questions. I would go and I would read speeches, and I would read the speeches over and over again until I had practically memorized them, until I understood everything that was being said in the speech. If something had been stated that I didn't understand, I would go back and read it and then research on it until I figured out what it was that they were talking about within that speech. Now, 2 books that I would definitely recommend: Cantillon Essay on Economic Theory. There's a link down in the description to an Amazon affiliate page in which that you can buy the essay, and I will get a little commission off of it, but you do not have to buy the essay. You can get it for free at the Mises Institute. So you could just go and click on the essay link. Just because anything you put in your cart after clicking on the link, I will also get a little commission for. So even if you're not buying the essay, just go and click on that Amazon affiliate link and then put whatever you want in the cart and go and purchase it within the next 30 days. Whatever you put in your cart for the next 24 hours and then purchase within the next 30 days, I will get a little commission for. So it's a great way to support the Uneducated Economist. But again, you do not have to buy the essay. You can get it for free at the Mises Institute. So just click on that affiliate link, learn how to spell Cantillon essay, and go and get it from the Mises Institute, and you can read through the essay for free. Just download that PDF. Creature from Jekyll Island, right? George Griffin, The Creature from Jekyll Island, excellent, excellent read for becoming aware of the Federal Reserve. Now, I am going to say this in a way that I don't want to mean any disrespect, but it is a bit conspiratorial, right? And people kind of know that. It is accurate in many, many fashions of it, but it is also in a way that will lead you to believe in a kind of a negative tone towards the Fed. How do I put it? I don't know. It's a great book to read, but it is a bit conspiratorial in its thought. But I totally believe that I would not be here today doing this channel if it wasn't for that book. Right? I mean, straight up, like, if it wasn't for The Creature from Jekyll Island, I know I wouldn't be here today. I know it wouldn't. So I've met G. Edward Griffin personally. He signed my copy of The Creature from Jekyll Island. And, I appreciate all the hard work that he has ever done. Super cool guy. Again, like, straight up appreciate it. So that would be the other one. The Creature from Jekyll Island, Cantillon Essay on Economic Theory. And those are really the two books, or if you want to call them books, that I have ever read that I could suggest out there. There's many other books, like I've read a good chunk of Ben Bernanke's book. I didn't read, I listened to it on Audible, right? Um, so there's some other ones out there that I have listened to bits and parts of, but as far as like the complete read, those are the only two. Everything else that I've learned from asking questions and then going and researching and trying to find the answer all on my own. Like, never went to a class, never had any, like, particular mentor or something like that. I listened to an insane amount of Peter Schiff. Like, Peter Schiff, if there was ever like anybody that I just listened to the most of, it was probably Peter Schiff, which is kind of funny now because, to think about. And as far as getting up to speed on like the credible threat theory and stuff like that, like the things that I talk about, I feel are very unique to this channel. I don't think there's anybody else out there who has taken in monetary policy the way that I have, who has internalized it and discusses the policy and the strategy from a working class point of view to benefit the working class like I have. Like, I think I'm the only one. So I don't think there's really any place out there that you can get the information like I have delivered. I mean, this is it, and it's really the viewers of the channel that developed it. We all did it together, really. It just happened to be here. Tom Flo, good spicy Saturday night chat. Thanks, one and all. Yeah, I really do appreciate everybody being here. Solomon Bachelor, thank you so much for the 5. What is that? Liras? I don't know what those are. Thank you so much. I wonder if the World Economic Forum are helping people, getting them to see how much far behind they will be as the Cantillon effect cuts rich from poor even more. I don't think so. I don't think the World Economic Forum or even the powers that be, the rich people, are going to do anything to slow down the inequality. Like, I have to think for even myself. Like, I want more in my life. I want a bigger savings account. I want a bigger stock portfolio. I want my house to be worth more. I want more income. I want, to take more vacations. I want to have a nicer car. I want more. And I'm one who's aware of the situation that even the idea of having that stuff is going to separate the rich from the poor even more. It's going to dive even more into luxuries. It's going to create even more of the problem. And I am aware of it. And I still want it in my life. Now, I drive a 97 Suburban. My wife drives a 99 Explorer. I mean, you can see this is a shirt that was sent to me from a viewer 5 years ago. I keep back on my expenses in a way that then gives me the ability to then position myself so that I would be somewhat secure with, any event that happens to come into the future. I'm hoping that I'm positioned in a way that I can deal with it. But even still, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to separate myself from the poor. Not necessarily like I got the mindset I'm trying to get away from the poor. I'm just trying to get more. I'm trying to get better stuff. I want a better car. I want better clothing. I want a nicer house. I want, whatever. And again, like, how do you prevent people from wanting that? You can't. You just simply can't. What is climbing? I got like a spider climbing on me or something. Whatever. I mean, if you can't see it, then what are you gonna do? You should have seen. I saw the biggest spider cleaning up today. It was this huge wolf spider that came out of the some of the patio furniture I was cleaning up and getting off of the patio. Infamous NYC. Did you cover the 86 million bank account closed in Vietnam due to non-compliance with the biometric. UK now going that same direction. What are your thoughts? Oh, wow. That's not surprising. Like, they're going to track, trace, control, and try to, I, it's not a surprise to me. Like, the idea of being diversified, a lot of times people will think, well, you got to be in real estate, and you got to be in bonds, and you got to be in stocks, and that's diversification. And to me, diversifying means you have to be able to position yourself for any situation. Government shutdown, banking shutdown, societies shutting down, whatever is happening out there, you have to be prepared for, right? And so when I think about like the issues that may come from a banking like crisis of whatever, well, I mean it would be scary, and it would be very, upsetting, and it would be difficult, but I'm not reliant on that, right? I'm not relying on that system to stay functioning. Many people are. And because they are relying on that system to stay functioning, now it's a very scary event. And so when you see issues like what has taken place, like I don't know the details of what's going on in Vietnam or UK or whatever. All right. Excuse me, guys. Let's scoot up here a little closer. I don't know what any of the details that are taking place inside of that, but I can tell you that like you are going to find more problems within the banking system going into the future. Like you were going to find issues like the Silicon Valley Bank crisis. Those type of things will happen going into the future. And it's not like the central banking system isn't aware of it, right? And so once they are aware of how this is going to happen, they are going to do stuff about it in order to create an economic environment that's lasting, right? So they can't tell you that they are going to have these safety nets to deal with the banking crisis. But ultimately, that's what they are going to have is a safety boat. If they described it and told you what those safety boats are, then you would price that into the system. Now, if they have a situation in which that they are needing to control the way that the flow of money is moving from one nation to another, or even the direction in which that money is flowing, like into particular assets or into particular commodities or something of that nature, then they're going to have to create an environment in that to deal with that. Right? And that's one of the reasons why I feel tokenization and cryptocurrencies and all that have been so prevalent in the news nowadays, is because they're literally trying to push that sort of scenario, one in which that they can control all those flows of currencies in the direction that they're going. This to me, this whole biometric, I mean, if that's the case, like you have to, have your fingerprint in your face and retina scans or whatever it is that's happening out there. I mean, I'm not doubting that to be the case, and that'll probably be more going into the future of things like that, which is all the more reason why you need to figure out how to get out of that. Why you would want to be in gold and silver, something very similar to that situation. Like when those things arise, I think to myself, that's the insurance policy. That's the reason why I have silver as an insurance policy, is for things just like that. But I would have to read up more about it to give you a better answer, Infamous NYC. Thank you so much for the support. All right, there's still too many paper dollars, and that's not even adding derivatives. There's going to be a lot more paper dollars. Like, if there's too many now, there's way more to come. Van life is the best way to save money. I agree. Millennial diligence. Like, I've tried to get so many people to live in their car. They're like, man, I don't have any place to live. And I'm like, you're single. You ain't got nothing else going on. Just live in your car. Right? And like, live in your car and save all that money. Work and live in your car and go shower down at the aquatic center and go and do your laundry at the laundromat and save a bunch of money and buy duplexes and live in the basement. Yeah, UK stated in one shot, if you don't do it, you can't work, have a bank, or buy food. Like, you done. They're like, you're out of the game. See, this is, and that's why I find it like, again, to me, being in a position in which that you could give them you can be like, screw you, I ain't doing it. Right? That's very difficult for most people because they're not in a position to do that. They'd be like, oh crap, man, if I don't show up tomorrow for work and I can't eat, I am out of the game and I'm going to starve and I'm going to be on the streets. And then they get very, very worried about that and the anxiety goes up and they fall in line. They go get the shot and they do the thing. But if you're sitting in a position that says, you know what? No, I ain't going to do it. And I'm going to figure out something else. So see you. Right? And everybody was to do that, government wouldn't have the control that they do. See, this is one of the reasons why I know that government's going to continue to do the things that they do, because nobody is in a position in which that they can tell the government to go F themselves. Right? I mean, they're really not. And so, since everybody is really relying on the government and begging for the government to do something, I know that the problems that we face today are going to continue to go into the future. But I don't worry about them. Like, I mean, when it came time to, here's the thing. When people were worried and they were saying, oh man, I have a right to not have to wear a mask. Yeah, you absolutely have a right to not have to wear a mask. All right? Absolutely. Nobody's telling you to do it. When you step onto private property and somebody says, hey man, I want you to wear a mask on my private property, you don't have to respect it. And they don't have to allow you on their property. Pretty fair, right? I mean, that's a fair thing. What's not fair is for somebody to come on and say, nah, it's my right to be on your property without a mask. That's not fair, is it? Because now it's my private property or their private property. And if it's my private property and their private property and they have rules on their private property that's different from my private property, I would expect them to respect my rules that I have if I respect their rules that they have. Because that's the way this works. Now, understanding that is way different from people saying, I have a right to not have to wear a mask. You do. You just don't have a right to do it in a private property, which is way different from what people were saying was violation of their rights. I disagree, Simon, on that because that's a medical decision. Walrus, you can disagree with it all you want. That's fine, right? But I am ultimately right on the private property issue. If I'm standing on private property, right, I have to abide by the owner of that property's rules if I want to be there. I don't care if it's a store or I don't care if it's somebody's house. The public might be allowed in there, but you're not allowed in there if you do not follow their rules, right? That's how it works. That's how all of this works. And to respect that means that you respect a private property. That's ultimate, right? Now, whether or not you believe in the effectiveness of the mask or the reasonings behind it, that's a whole other story, right? That's a completely different topic. The same as no shirt, no shoes, no service. 100% right. The bulb effect is a supply chain phenomenon where small shifts in consumer demand and the retail level create large and larger swings as you move up the stream from wholesaler, manufacturer, supplier. Absolutely. Who is it? Javier Rodriguez. Thank you so much. Dude's name is Walrus. All right. You don't argue with a member of the family working on the gun barrel convenience store. It works and it's congruent with libertarian values about private property. Yeah. See, that was something I couldn't do. But when, for example, I mean, I guess it's I didn't talk about it for the longest time, but I didn't go get the shot, right? I didn't do it. I was asked to. I said, no, I'm not. I'm not going to do it. I haven't done anything like that for a very long time, and I have no intentions on doing it this time either. Now, it was getting very close to the point that it was going to be like, yeah, you either have to do it or you can't be here anymore. And I would have had to accept that. And I would have at the time, right? Ultimately, it didn't come to that. And I never, like, anytime people ask me, I mean, I was not able to participate in a couple of things that was requiring me to have that particular shot. I said no. I'm not going to do it. And if you're not going to allow me to participate in these particular things, then I guess I'm not going to be participating in them. Now, ultimately, it was nothing that really changed anything about my life whatsoever. The things in my life that were really grand, flying down to do the rebel capitalist, all the other travelings and everything I did, I was never restricted, never had any problems, never lost anything. I never had any issues like that. The only thing I wasn't doing was I wasn't allowed to participate in some events. Millennial Diligence, thank you so much for the $2, man. You've really hit me up with the super chats tonight. I really appreciate it. My company offered $1,000 for the shot. I declined. Holy crap. Wow. I was out of work for 7 months. USPS letter carrier. Very lame. Oh, that's a bummer. I will be the same as the digital. It will be the same as the digital ID. No clot shop for me and my kids. You got it, man. Yeah, I appreciate you, man. I really do. Thank you so much, Millennial Diligence. I like the name, too. All right, Warp Speed, Donald Blumpeth? Huh. Well, I don't know. When it comes to the whole, like, Donald Trump and everything with these tariffs and everything that's going on, I I really do think back to my credible threat theory and what it is that the Federal Reserve was needing for their monetary policy. If you just kind of think about what it is that they were needing for their monetary policy and then the results of what it is that actually occurred here within everything, it was a benefit to the Fed. Like everything was really, I mean, pretty much since COVID, has been a benefit to the Federal Reserve. Even the credible threat of tariffs have benefited the Federal Reserve. And as many people disagree with that and think, oh, the Fed doesn't know what to do and they're fighting against Trump and Trump is going to fire them all and all this other stuff, I'm thinking, I don't know if it could have worked out any better for them. Like, I really don't think it could have worked out any better for the Federal Reserve than it has. And that's what's really scary about it for most people that I am like listening to out there is that they think that the Fed has no idea what they are doing. And they think that Donald Trump is somehow going to take over the Federal Reserve. And then when I incorporate what it is that the people have been listening to and how that reaction is going to take place in the economy, I'm thinking, man, that right there, like those people's belief system is again benefiting the Fed, much like the hyperinflation that the money printer was going to cause benefited the Federal Reserve. The people who hate the Fed the most are literally giving the Fed the power they need. And that's what's like, it took me a while to figure out that was what was going on, but they are using the angry narrative against the Fed against the people themselves. It like literally like the more they jack up that anger, that anger towards the Fed, the more that actually gives the Fed the power that they are looking for and needing. Yeah. And that's what's really odd about it because most people will never ever be able to see it, especially those who hate the Federal Reserve. Those who want to end the Fed, who say that, go back to a gold standard, all this other stuff. The rhetoric that they put out there is generally one of inflationary scenarios or hyperinflation scenarios. And that is what the Federal Reserve was hoping and wishing and needing in order to save their monetary policy. Once you see it, it's like you can't unsee it. It's just like, oh gosh, man, all these people had no idea what they were doing when they were saying, end the Fed, go back to gold standard, hyperinflationary scenario, we hate the Fed. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, every time they say that, every time they push out that information, every time I see it on out there on the social medias or whatever, I'm thinking, man, the Federal Reserve is in the background giving each other high fives. They were back there going, man, how is it that we are going to solve this fact that we cannot find an inflationary scenario, even though we had printed up all this money out of the great financial crisis, quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4, took the balance sheet of $850 billion to over $4.5 trillion and failed to produce an inflationary scenario. Now what? That's what the Federal Reserve was stuck at. They were like, man, if we could only figure out a way to get an inflationary scenario, if we could have a hyperinflationary expectation, that might save the day. And did they not get it? Oh my gosh. They got like all the inflation expectation they could ever have possibly wanted, and they were happy to take it. They were happy to take it. They got their monetary policy back. They're getting their ammunition back. That neutral interest rate was rising. That was what was giving them the ability to then lower interest rates and stimulate the economy. And now that they are in that position, we are watching what it is that they are going to do to deal with the fact that that neutral interest rate may actually start to fall. I mean, Myron seems to think that the new Fed governor FOMC voting member, right? Trump's guy up at the Fed, he says that the neutral interest rate is starting to fall, and that if the Federal Reserve doesn't lower interest rates, the economy might be far more restricted than people are thinking that it's going to be with the Fed lowering rates. Like, the Federal Reserve has to chase the neutral interest rate down. That's essentially what Myron is saying. I don't know how many people see it the way we do. Here on the Uneducated Economist, we see this monetary policy, we see the economy so differently. Like, I am pretty sure I am the only one who you will ever hear discuss it the way that I do. Like, nobody else has this theory. I can't find anybody who talks about it on the news, right? I can't find anybody who talks about it in the way that I do. Millennial Diligence, $2. Oh, that was it. Mike offered me the $1,000 for the decline. There we go. Where's the other one? Javier Rodriguez, thank you so much for the $1, man. You guys are so awesome with the contributions and the support for the channel. I can never thank you guys enough. The YouTube algorithm isn't always that friendly to the Uneducated Economist, and although I could go out there and I can sensationalize it, and I could try and drive a bunch of fear mongering, videos and do the whole doom and gloom thing and make a bunch of money off of it, which would be kind of fun and entertaining in a way, but that's not going to be helpful. Right? What's helpful and useful is discussing and understanding the economic forces, hearing the history, recognizing how these things play out over and over again, knowing how the separation has taken place and how to position yourself for it. That is helpful, useful. Right? That's helpful and useful. I mean, at least to me, I don't know. Maybe it's just entertaining for other people. I never know when you're on. Glad to be here. MLB, I am glad you are here too. And here's the thing. I am very random. For the most part, I am fairly consistent during the week because I do it on my lunch break, and I usually take my lunch at the same time. But when it comes to the weekend, if the family's like crashing out, if they're bored, if they're putting on a movie I don't want to watch, I'm out here doing video, All right. Colorado governor polls encourage getting out and touring, recreating own state, no mask in the great outdoors. That's why I left New Mexico for here. All right. The problem I had with mask policy was that it was largely driven by government mandate. Many businesses that had no interest in enforcing the mask wearing were coerced by government thugs. Well, maybe it happened. I didn't see it, and I don't know of any businesses that were shut down or fined for not having masks. Like, I heard about the threatening of it, but I don't know, maybe I just didn't see it on the news or whatever was happening. But I generally look for those things personally. Like I want to know somebody who was fined. I want to know somebody whose business got shut down because they didn't do it. Now I do know a few like businesses that were saying, hey, they aren't enforcing it, and at this particular place, like, whatever. And I don't know whatever happened to it because I didn't like they didn't get shut down, or whatever. So it just makes me wonder, like, how much of it was actually enforced. World Central Bank purchases of gold are now greater than Treasuries bond purchases this year so far. Yeah. I mean, well, I think that's kind of goes in line with the milkshake theory, doesn't it? The dollar milkshake theory, where gold and the dollar would rise together. Uh, Yui, what? Any thoughts about the U.S. bailing out Argentina's economy? Um, I mean, no. I mean, outside of like, I mean, it's not a surprise that they would do that. It's not when you think about like what it is that countries bail out other nations quite a bit, right? And it's not uncommon for like China to bail out nations as well. They'll go and fund them a bunch of money or whatever it is that's happening. So, in my opinion, like this isn't something that's unusual to take place. I don't know, like I don't think there's any kind of major economic event that's going to happen because of it. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I mean, to me, I read a little bit about it and I'm thinking, well, I mean, this seems like a bigger deal or it seems like people are making a bigger deal out of it than really what is, like, I don't know, like what kind of actual economic event that is going to change or how that economic event is going to change anything about how things are being done now. It's more signs of the times and the demand for, the dollars outside of the United States, and this is just another sign of that taking place. And it goes much in line with, a lot of other nations out there who are suffering the consequences of being in a dollar shortage or just being in a lack of funds or even economic activity, just not being able to export your goods and services out there for, you know, for the things that you need. I mean, to me, this is not new, and I find like you'll probably find more evidence of or more things like this becoming evident in the future. Yeah. I got into many a fight over it. What are you talking about, NYC? Okay. Yeah, I never wore a mask on the train, even when they said they would fine you. I was literally the only one on the train not wearing a mask while in my scrubs. Right? The businesses I know that were affected in 2020 were due to the regs, like not getting a permit. I got into many fights over it. Jeez. I just took it for what it was, man. I mean, I got a libertarian mindset to it. It was just like the train or the grocery store or somebody's house or anything else. Those are private properties, right? Now, again, like, I mean, I pay for the service, I want to pay for the products and all this other stuff. If they want my money, then they should like accept me for who I am and what it is that I want to do. And as long as I'm not bothering anybody, they should just be cool with it. But if they made this rule, that's their rule, right? I don't have to wear the mask on the street. But if I want to be on, if I want to use their service, if I want to be, it's like much like this YouTube channel. I don't like the censorism, like the censorship that takes place. Not only on the things that I say, which happens to be two of the oddest things that I have found that what I speak about actually gets censored, or not necessarily censored as much as I get demonetized, right? Which is like a form of censorship in the way that I don't want to make the videos if I don't get paid, right? So I can talk about it all day long, but they're not going to spread that information around and I'm not going to get paid to do it. So there is censorship here on this channel. What am I going to do? It's not my platform. right? This is YouTube. YouTube makes the rules. YouTube says, hey, we got advertisers that don't want to advertise to particular content. If you provide that content, we can't provide you with the advertisers. So guess what? You're not going to get paid. Okay, so there's a balance that needs to be had here. I've talked about all kinds of stuff. And the only thing that I really ever found that seems to to hurt the channel is the cannabis industry and people who don't live in homes, and I don't get why. All right, it's those two topics that seem to really nail it. And when I do, it kills the algorithm. And I don't. I mean, I've never have figured out why those seem to be the one, but they are. Simon, we don't have money for our people. We have money to bail out other countries. Really? Well, I think you. I think to understand that the real issue is trying to get the money out of the nation. Like Triffin's dilemma, understanding Triffin's dilemma is really kind of like, again, it's one of the four economic forces, but it's kind of the key to understanding why it's more important to try and get the money out of the nation. You know, and here's the other funny part about it is just like when people get mad about some of the government programs where they see the government waste taking place, you think, well, they're just sending it to these wasteful organizations who just dump it and they don't do anything useful with it and just like whatever, right? And I think, well, that's actually part of it, right? Because they don't really care where the money goes so long as it fills the sluices. And in fact, it's probably better that they give it to some stupid organization who doesn't do good with it because they will wastefully spend it and it will probably go out in many directions quicker, right? Because it's all about filling the sluices. Get that money out there. See, now you can have a situation in which that the demand for dollars outside of the United States grows very dramatically and it starts burdening the United States economy. It starts causing the dollar to strengthen. Now, you can get those dollars out of the nation in a couple of ways. The easiest way is to buy other people's stuff. But what's even easier is to literally give it to them, right? And if you can give them the money, then they will again spend that money and start, pushing it out there in many directions. And that's part of filling the sluices. So if you ever have like dollar crisis, dollar liquidity issues that are taking place out there, and they're not, and you need to start filling the sluices, you need to start getting the money out there in many directions, it's might as well just give it to people who are going to be stupid with it. All right. I mean, literally, that's like how like if you give it to people who are smart, they're going to be like, well, no, I'm going to be, I'm going to hold on to it. I'm going to put it in appropriate position so that I can get a return on it. Well, that's production and savings. Well, that's not going to work. We're a consumer debtor. That means you need to get the money out there and get it to work. Get it to start chasing goods and services, not holding on to it and saving it. That's the wrong direction, right? So yeah, really. There's people here in the United States you could give the money to, but that wouldn't help. You need to get the money out of the United States. That's where the real demand for it is. All right, millennial diligence again. Can mass boycotts, general strike, delay collapse? Delayed the collapse. What collapse are you talking about? Like, is it the collapse, like the inequality collapsing, like the bottom half, or is it a collapse of the entire system that you're talking about? Yeah. Nothing you can do to prevent an inevitable collapse when the new money turns off. So any boycott, I'm not sure what the boycott would be towards, but any kind of boycott, I don't know what that would be like. Like a boycott towards bonds, like treasury bonds. I'm not, the loss of the dollar as the world reserve currency. That can't happen. Millennial diligence, that's like almost an impossibility, right? And here's the reason why. If you think about it, the reason why the dollar was even able to become the world reserve currency is because people believed at one time that it was as good as gold. So it never would have made it to the position that it did if the people hadn't convinced themselves that they were able to trade their dollars in for gold. Because see, you think about it, here you had a situation in which the United States States was the world's manufacturing powerhouse. We produce all this wonderful stuff, and then we sent that stuff out there to the world, and the world sent us their gold. Well, what happens after you create a situation where you get all the gold? And you're like, hey, I got more stuff for you to buy. And the people are like, hey, we would love to buy your stuff, United States, but you already got all the gold. We can't buy your stuff. Like, you got to give us back the gold. That's the redistribution of wealth. This is the Cantillon effect. Now, Cantillon describes that, where you have this equilibrium that takes place. You have a manufacturing state that rises. They produce all this wonderful stuff. They get all this gold again. They raise their standard of living. They start buying foreign production, and then the gold goes over to the foreign producers. And there's this equilibrium that takes place between these different nations. They're all chasing the gold. And each one of them becoming the manufacturer, the shipper, the distributor, the whatever, the producer, that then gets the new money coming in. When you have an abundance of new money coming in, you raise your standard of living and eventually relinquish that new money back out there to the other nations. Now, when it came time for the United States to do that, they said, nah, we're not going to do that. Right? Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to issue out fiat currency, so that the transactions can continue. And you can be able to trade that fiat currency in for gold. And the people were like, wait, what? Like, you're going to get paper dollars, and a certain amount of paper dollars will be able to acquire a certain amount of gold from you. And we were like, yeah, that's exactly right. And the people were like, well, all right, we want to do transactions. So they could have denied it right then. They could have said, nah, we're not taking this fiat currency. Give us the gold. You guys are done. Your manufacturing is over. You dove into luxuries. You have all the gold. It's time to relinquish it back out here. We are not accepting fiat currency. But that didn't happen. They said, well, no, the fiat currency is as good as gold, right? So we can cash in so many dollars, get a certain amount of gold, and we're going to continue to do transactions like this. The United States and the whole world and everybody else agreed. They didn't necessarily like it, but they wanted to do the transactions, right? They wanted to be able to buy stuff, buy and sell things. And if there wasn't enough gold, because the United States had it, and the United States was was in a position in which that they would provide all these dollars to do the transactions, the people accepted it. They didn't have to, they did, right? Now, as they started to accept these dollars to do transactions, the United States ever increased the amount of dollars out there to meet the demand of transactions that were wanting to take place. The people were wanting to do more work. They wanted to grow more carrots. They wanted to sell more fish. They wanted to do more services, whatever it was that was out there. They wanted more of it. In order to do more, they had to have ever increasing amounts of new currency. See, it was sold on the idea that once the business activity heated up and there was a limited amount of gold, the Federal Reserve would inject a bunch of money into the system and then pull that money back out once things slowed down. It was going to be an elastic money supply, right? And as the world kept growing, they said, yeah, we like doing these transactions. And you know what? There's not enough gold, but there is this fiat currency. And if you're willing to trade that fiat currency into gold at any time we want, then we'll use it, I guess. Don't necessarily want to, but since we don't have any other choice and we do want to do transactions, they accepted it. So the more that they accepted it, the more the demand for dollars increased, the more they produced the dollars. Then it got to a point that said, hey, man, we want that gold. And the United States is like, whoa, no way. We have produced way too many dollars so that you could do transactions. All these world transactions, they don't come easy. They don't come without having something out there. And the people were accepting of the dollar, believing that they could get their gold from it. And when they said, nah, you're not going to be able to get the gold from it anymore. We're going to sever ourselves from the gold standard. The people were pissed. But by that time, it was too late. There was nothing else. There was literally nothing else to use. They could have used other money. They did have other money to use. There was other currencies that were being used as a world reserve currency, but nothing in the abundance of what the United States was doing. And that's where it really fell. Like right now, we do not have to use the dollar, but there is nothing else to use. Even if you wanted to use another currency, there's not enough of it. There wasn't enough gold. There's not enough BRICS nations. There's not enough euros. There's not enough anything else out there because there's no other nation. There's nobody else out there who is willing to produce the amount of money that is like the United States has done, mainly coming from the United States debt issuance. Nobody is willing, no nation is willing to go into debt as deep as the United States has done in order to provide the world with the safe and liquid asset of U.S. treasuries, which is essentially the backing for the dollar. No nation is willing to do it. There's nobody else. Like, even if they wanted to be, they can't because there's not there. It's just simply not it's not there, you know. All right, thank you MLB for the 1999, man. This is great. You guys are really loading me up tonight. This is awesome. Could not get to 20. Great stream. Let's go Yankees. Oh, man. Well, you know, I would have to say, you know, when it comes to baseball and, you know, teams win and lose all the time. And it's not so much whether or not a team wins, like my favorite team winning or something like that. That's not really the case. I mean, I like it when the Red Sox win. I like it when the Mariners win, but nothing gives me as much pleasure as watching the Yankees lose. Just saying, you know. All right, Millennial Intelligence, thank you so much for the $2. All nations we hate don't like World Bank. Well, I mean, whether you like it or not, I don't know if that's necessarily like, I mean, I think that's inconsequential. Like, it doesn't matter with we like it. Like, we don't have to like the dollar. You don't have to like Bitcoin. You don't have to like gold. You don't have to like any of these things. But there's just certain items that are out there that are, you don't like really have any other choice. Okay? Like, I don't necessarily like the dollar, right? And but then again, I don't like dislike the dollar. Like, to like it or dislike it means that you have some sort of expectation about it. And the only expectation I have for it is that it's a currency. It's going to trade something for something else. It's going to trade goods and services for other goods and services. And when I just think about it in that fashion, I relinquish it of its being a good or bad thing. It doesn't have a good or bad thing to it. It's just a currency. And one day it won't serve as a currency anymore. Something else will be serving as a currency. And hopefully I'll be in a position to recognize that at the time so that I can, you know, transition over into that. And that's just, you know, how I look at it. At the end of the day, it's not important, you know. I love this channel. Well, thank you, Millennial Diligence. I really appreciate you guys. Yeah. Javier Rodriguez, what's your outlook on the West Coast commercial real estate? Is the real turnaround on the horizon, or will the sector keep getting dragged out and delayed? I don't know. I'm thinking it's probably going to continue to get dragged out and delayed. I don't see a turnaround happening anytime in like I don't see any kind of significant turnaround taking place at any time in the near future. Right? I don't necessarily see things getting worse though, and that's where I'm thinking like we're kind of at the bottom in a lot of ways. You know, things could get worse for some people out there. You know, the layoffs could rise and, you know, people losing their jobs, and there could see a lot, you know, some bankruptcies, corporations going bankrupt and stuff like that. Those sort of scenarios could happen. But as far as like major downturn, I think we've suffered through the majority of the major downturn. Unless outside of like, you know, full on like financial collapse taking place. And as far as that part, I don't see that happening either. Really what I think is going to end up happening in about 6 months is that you're going to start seeing tariff things start fading away. Like nobody will be talking about tariffs anymore. It'll fade away like nobody talks about COVID anymore. You remember, like there was a time that was the only thing anybody talked about for years was COVID. right? And how that destroyed the economy, how it destroyed, the supply chains, how it destroyed the banking system, how it destroyed the government, how it destroyed everybody's lives. That's the only thing that people talked about. It was the main focus. Now, nobody cares. Like, literally, nobody cares about COVID anymore. Not important. At one time, it was the most important thing in the entire world. The moment that you alleviate the people of the problem of COVID, it alleviated a whole lot of economic problems too. It was in their head, right? Like, COVID didn't go away. We still got COVID, right? But we don't have the problems of COVID because people don't make it important. They don't make it a problem anymore. Not like they did. They used to be a problem. Now it's not a problem. It's like, it's not a problem. No worries, right? But before they were like, no, it's real important. We got to make it a problem. The only difference was their mindset. Yeah. All right. I thought I had appendix. What is that? A couple weeks ago. Nope. Struck, fart, embarrassed, and absurd. And embrace the absurd. Oh. All right. Ukraine war started and COVID went away. Ukraine sidelined the major COVID story. No. COVID didn't. No, COVID was used to create a supply chain breakdown in order to elevate the inflation expectation. Right? That's what that was all about. Because that's what it did. I mean, it was a benefit to the Federal Reserve. What they did is they used COVID to sever the supply chain, create shortages, use the fear, uncertainty, and doubt over it to elevate the inflation expectation, and propagated that information throughout the mainstream media. Once they were done with that, everybody just turned to another story. No, it wasn't to sideline it or cover it up. It's because it just ran its course. They didn't need it for anything anymore. Yeah. So are you saying COVID was a creation? I ain't saying anything about COVID being any kind of creation or anything like that. What I am saying is that it was an incredible coincidence that the Federal Reserve was in a position in which that they were about ready to deploy something called the makeup strategy, and COVID made that irrelevant. So, was COVID created? I mean, maybe. A lot of people say that it was. I don't know. Like, I'm not a scientist. I just look at the stuff that I'm reading on the internet just like everybody else. Whether it was created or not is inconsequential to the outcome, which was that of a severing of the supply chain that created an inflationary scenario that was making up from the fact that that the Federal Reserve failed to produce the 2% target over the previous 10 years. COVID was essentially what the makeup strategy was intending on doing. Right? I don't know how many people realize it. Literally, the Federal Reserve had a strategy, a game plan called the makeup strategy, where they were going to let inflation run extra hot, extra long for an extended period of time. And they had all this ways of deploying information, speeches, music videos, commercials, social media posts. They had all these ways of trying to figure out how it was that they were going to push this idea into the mainstream, considering that very few people actually listen to the Federal Reserve, right? They knew that they would have to do it through different means in order to get that information out there. They would have to do it on talk shows. They would have to do it in like places that people would not typically hear banking information so that they could get that information out to them. They had this whole strategy to do that. COVID took care of business for them. They didn't need to do any of that stuff because COVID came in and saved the day for the Federal Reserve. That's what I'm saying. All right. Solomon, apparently inflation had been running too low for too long, and the Fed had to find a way to get the extra high with inflation rates to get to the average 2% inflation. Jeff, that is absolutely right. Is Solomon, are you kind of new to the channel? Solomon Bachelor, what is the makeup strategy? Okay, yeah, you are, man, bro. Cool, awesome. I am so glad you're here, man. This is I'm glad because you must be new to the channel because we talk about this quite a bit. So if you're asking what the makeup strategy is, essentially what happened was is that back in 2018, I had come across a speech called Monetary Policy Strategies for a Low Neutral Interest Rate World, and I know that's kind of a mouthful, but really what was going on here? Oops. Okay. Let me bring it up here. Monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world is right there. Boom. Okay. So, monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world. And in this speech, he essentially kind of spelled it out for us. He said that today we face an altogether different set of problems stemming from a very low neutral interest rate. That is, the short term real interest rate consistent with an economy operating at its potential alongside low and stable inflation. Here we go. Ironically, the problem we need to solve these days is a risk of inflation that is persistently too low rather than too high. Isn't that amazing to think? I mean, here we got a central banker from 2018. This is like a top central banker, the New York Fed president, John Williams, who's saying that the problem that they need to solve is a risk of inflation that is too low rather than too high, meaning that they need inflation too high. Right? He goes on. What is a low neutral interest rate monetary policy and the anchoring of inflation expectations? When a recession hits, central banks may not be able to reduce interest rates well below the neutral level to stimulate the economy as warranted by the effective lower bound. So here's the problem that the Federal Reserve and many central banks around the world were facing is that if you can imagine zero, okay, zero interest rates, the neutral interest rate, which is the rate that is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy, it's when the Federal Reserve is the Fed funds rate are neutral, was very close to zero, right? So here you got the lower bound of zero. This is what they refer to it as, the lower bound. And you had the neutral interest rate very close to it. When the Fed lowered the Fed funds rate to the lower bound of zero, when they took the Fed funds rate to zero, they were barely below neutral, which meant that they did not stimulate the economy by hitting the lower bound of zero. Zero interest rate policy did not stimulate the economy. They could not find the inflationary scenario that they were looking for. Quantitative easing, 1, 2, 3, and 4, zero interest rate policy after the great financial crisis failed to produce the inflationary scenario. They could not get to the 2% target. All right? This is what this speech is talking about. It's like they were like, crap, we just did all this money printing and we were at zero interest rate policy and we still did not find the inflation we were looking for. The problem we need to solve is the risk of inflation that is persistently too low rather than too high. That is incredible to think. Most people don't know this. Even though it was very well spoken about within the Federal Reserve, the mainstream media did not clarify this or make it abundantly aware, right? Now, what ends up happening here is that if you have the Fed funds rate very close to zero with a low neutral interest rate and there's no more downward adjustment to try and stimulate the economy, the next best plan is to try and raise the inflation up as high as you can in order to raise the Fed funds rate and to raise that neutral interest rate and to get it ever closer to the Fed funds rate or to elevate it away from the lower bound of zero. If you can get the neutral interest rate to rise, which remember, we can't observe the neutral interest rate in real time. If you can get that neutral interest rate to rise, you are essentially getting the ammunition back for the Federal Reserve, who can then now lower interest rates far enough below neutral to actually stimulate the economy before hitting the lower bound of zero again. Now, did they actually get their ammunition back? Who knows? We don't know exactly where neutral interest rate is. We do know that it's closer to the Fed funds rate today than it was a year or two ago. But how much ammunition do they actually have if they were to lower the Fed funds rate back to zero? That's very questionable. All right. The words that they use have an incredible amount of power within the markets. So they switch from using interest rate adjustments to try and stimulate the economy and use their words instead. Elevating the inflation expectation is what gives them the ability to then use their words for their power, as that will also raise the neutral interest rate with the expectation. This is so difficult. Like, this may be very confusing considering the deepness of how, like, it's very esoteric in the sense that you have to have a specific understanding of the information in order to compile it all together to make sense of it all. But this is really how the Federal Reserve is going down. All right. What I explained to you in the last 5 minutes here, this is the true strategy, the true monetary policy of the Federal Reserve. Everything else is essentially delusional thoughts that don't make any kind of sense at all. Like when I listen to like a lot of the mainstream media, what it is that I've communicated is coming directly from the Fed itself, right? Let's see. Infamous NYC. I was thinking of grabbing some farmland, but it's just me. Maybe enough to put my trailer on it just in case. I mean, when it comes to land, like, I don't know how you could really go wrong, especially bare land. There's not a lot of taxes on it. They're not really making any more of it, right? It's useful. I mean, to me, like, empty land, bare land is way more, exciting for me than a house would be. You're an interesting cat, Kirk. All right. The Fed must raise the inflation expectation to lower the burden of the national debt. Investors' confidence in the bonds has decreased, but the debt can be inflated away. Yeah, it is. I could fix cars. I would buy a car like for $3,500. That's about the most cash too valuable. Yeah, most cash too valuable. I get it. Property taxes are insane in some places. Yeah, they are. Peace to UE and chat. All right, on Larry Bird. Is it true that Trump administration is going to give out $2,000 stimulus deposit next month? I doubt it. I don't know, maybe. They're only rumors at this point. Yeah. It's kind of funny because, like, if they put that rumor out there well enough, like, I don't know how many people, like, were, like, already spending the money that they didn't have to spend or pay their student debt back with. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, every time I hear about, somebody said, oh, they're going to promise us to take away they're going to relieve us of our student loan debt, or they're going to, stimulus checks, they're going to do all this other stuff. And I think to myself, excuse me, that's kind of like the wealth effect. Like, if you are somebody who has a bunch of stocks and then all of a sudden the stock market just screams higher and it goes way up, and your stock portfolio goes up $10,000, all of a sudden you feel more comfortable about being able to spend your money because you had this stock portfolio just go up by 10 grand in a couple of days or something. That's like the wealth effect. And I think that that's what they do to the people through the mainstream media by the promises of stimulus checks or the cutting of student loans or anything like that. Yeah. All right. What effect would the rumor have? That is the real thing to look at. Yep. All right. There's no such thing as free money. Someone has to pay for it. You can go wrong if you purchase a piece of land and you can't sell it because nobody wants that location. Yeah, I can agree with that. Like, there's, I mean, you go over to Eastern Oregon and there's land out there. You can buy hundreds of acres for like practically nothing, but it's just empty desert with nothing on it and not near anything. Why would anybody want to buy it from you? But I mean, for somebody who wants to be, out in the middle of nowhere by themselves in the middle of the desert, they might really enjoy that. Okay, I don't know, guys. It's weird because I keep seeing these articles and on my Google feed that says the next month it's already been approved. The IRS is preparing for it. Land is only valuable depending on the state you're living in. Thanks, all-nighter hiders spending the peanuts. They get overlooked easy. Read my super chat question. Sorry, Justin. Let me go check it out. I just saw all-nighter sent me a message to go find it. There it is. There we go, Justin. $2. How's Ukraine conflict fit into the economic policy? I mean, I'm not sure what economic policy, because you got two different policies. You got fiscal policy and you got monetary policy. Now, fiscal policy is the stuff that comes from the government, right? Monetary policy is what's coming from the Federal Reserve. Generally, monetary policy is balance sheet adjustments and interest rate adjustments. So, monetary policy is different from fiscal policy, and the Ukraine issue is more of a fiscal policy than it is a monetary policy. Now, I don't see anything that's taken place within the Ukraine changing anything about what it is that the Federal Reserve is doing with their monetary policy. Ultimately, the Federal Reserve was looking to have the Fed funds rate at neutral. Now, that neutral interest rate was rising based on an inflation expectation and an elevated one at that. Now, the Ukraine war definitely put a lot of inflation expectation within the people, especially when it started disrupting a lot of the energy shipping channels that were taking place. That had a huge impact on that sort of like idea of what this is going to do into the future. But mainly, most of that, from what I can see, has pretty much been settled out. Like, it's found its equilibrium on where it is that people are going to be shipping and channeling and doing their, commerce, considering what has taken place within the Ukraine war. Now, with that all being said, not saying it can't get worse, right? But ultimately, like, what we have experienced was the impact of it, and now this is the results of it. Right? Is the inflation getting worse because of it? I don't see that. Like, it did at first when people were like, "Oh crap, what do we do?" Right? Because that initial shock and awe event, that would definitely have an inflationary impact, especially as people start changing their behaviors. But now the majority of that has happened. Right? I don't see how the Fed has changed anything about their monetary policy, in the idea that they were trying to get the Fed funds rate to neutral or to get the neutral interest rate to elevate. Now, did the Ukraine war help out in the idea of creating an inflationary scenario? Yeah, absolutely it did. COVID helped, Ukraine helped, right? Tariffs help. All that stuff is helping to create the elevated inflation expectation that the Federal Reserve was needing. So in my mind, like, did they do it to create a elevated inflation expectation to benefit the Fed? No, I don't think that at all. I think that the Federal Reserve was just happened to be in a position in which that was working for them, and then they used it. All right. How much time do I have here? Alrighty, guys. I'm starting to run low on my battery power, and we're almost 2 hours into this, so we're just gonna call it at the 2 hour mark. Man, we did like what? Almost 4 hours of live streams today, guys. You're hard at work, man. Where is your YouTube 100K subscriber plate? I have it hanging on the wall. All nighter seeing it. I have it hanging on the wall next to my desk in my house. All right. Oh, by the way, he's only a multi-billionaire. Who's that? Okay, so when a major event occurs in the news, I ask myself if this affects the fiscal or monetary policy, and which one more. Right. Well, like, I think about it, like, I don't see the Federal Reserve making snap decisions based on the current economic, or I'm sorry, the current like shocking awe events that take place within the economy. Like, Somebody might say, what is the Federal Reserve going to do with this news? And I think to myself, nothing. They're not going to do anything on account of that news. What's going to end up happening is if the news is prevalent enough to change the way that the people are behaving, then that in itself will create the economic environment in which it is that the Federal Reserve would need to react to, right? Now, most of the time when I think about that, they are not waiting for that to occur. Like, what is it that the people are going to feel? I don't think that to be the case. I don't think that's what the Fed does. The Federal Reserve has done stuff like, at the next meeting, we are going to start raising rates, and we're going to continuously raise them into the future. Right? Then the people start reacting to that information, and you start seeing all kind of interest rate adjustments and asset prices changing and all kinds of like economic events start to occur because of that. And the Fed hadn't done anything. They just said something. They just said what they were about ready to do, and now they have all this economic and activity starting to happen on account of it. And then when the Fed does move, people look and say, "Oh, see, the Fed is reacting to this, reacting to the markets." This is probably like how the biggest misunderstanding is taking place. Right? For me, I don't look at what it is that's happening within the economy changing the way that the Federal Reserve is conducting themselves. The Federal Reserve conducts themselves in a way that gets the market's reaction. That's what I'm seeing out there. People think it's the other way around. They think that the Federal Reserve is reacting to the markets. They're not. The markets are reacting to the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve and their expectations that they have presented out there, the signaling that they are using. Right? I mean, we've talked about this so many times on this channel. From Jefferson's speech, how they use specific words and sentences, how it's quickly incorporated into asset prices, and they know that the markets interpret that information that will either be an easing or tightening of financial conditions. They know how to do this. All right, 4 more minutes, guys. I'm just saying people 100 years ago used to live without a credit score, and great-great-grandparents lived pretty decent, successful lives and have FICO scores. Yeah, Nathan, but that was also living in a time when we were a consumer, we were a producing saving economy, right? Now we're a consumer debtor-based economy. It's not the same thing. So when you talk about the way that grandpa used to be, but that was a different time. It was a different time in the cycle. It was a different economic condition, different money. It was, everything about it was different. It wasn't the same that we experience today. And so, yeah, you didn't need that stuff back then because it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same as what it is today. All right, those guys are 65 and 80. That's yesterday. We got at least 2 bots talking to each other in the chat. Oh, man, bummer. Okay, I didn't know that all-nighter. Stop flow. Okay, I'm a boomer. Bedtime. Great chat, everyone. Peace. Alrighty, Tom. Yeah, we're about ready to end this here in about 2 minutes ourselves. So thank you for being here, bud. I really appreciate it. You guys are so awesome. 167 people watching with 135 likes and $92 in super chats. My goodness. Way awesome of you guys to support the channel like you do. That's just incredible. I can never thank you guys enough for it. It really gets me out here more. All right, stay asleep, boomer. Stay asleep, boomer. Oh, millennial. All right, Neil, manufacturing is not coming back. I agree. It's not. Did Neil say something about that, Neil? Evolution of monetary policy, none of it is new. What did all-nighter say up here? Pedro, you may have to go into your settings and let YouTube know you're open to receiving memberships. Great show. Thank you, Millennial Diligence. I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. All right. Let's go, Yanks. You guys, MLB is still with the Yanks. Okay. No, I really appreciate it. You guys are the ones who make the show. You really are. I mean, it's the comment section. You guys having fun in the comment section, having the conversations with each other, sharing your ideas. I'm just kind of here, almost like the entertainment. Like I'm trying to bring up the subject, to bring up the talking points, and then share some of the conversation within the comment section itself. But really, ultimately, like you're the channel. Like, the comment section is the channel. all my bills all my bills paid goes off my FICO score. Great show, man. Love Astoria. Thank you, Millennial Diligence. I really appreciate it. Peace, and thank you, Yui. Thank you, Atticus Now. I really appreciate you, man. Gunny's Rule. I'm not sure what that is. Justin, if you can find the poorest people in the highest poverty, you may find where manufacturing is going through. Um, I don't know about the poorest people in the highest poverty, but I think like if you have the best infrastructure with the lowest standard of living, that would probably do it. What are your thoughts in the recent bull run in silver? Man, I love silver. Silver is the insurance policy of all insurance policies. All right. Matt, thank you, Simon. Yep. Light storm boomer. All right. We're there, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody being here. Didn't want to blow that question off about the silver. Silver is absolutely the best position that I feel that anybody who is trying to get a start, that's the start that they should go to. Go down to the coin store. It's going to be a little bit more than it has been, but go down and get yourself a silver bullion. You put that thing in your hand and you feel the value of what it is that you have. You know the reality of what it is. To me, that gets you outside of that third party claim. That gets you the ability to sleep at night knowing that anything that happens with the politicians, what happens in the banking system, what happens outside is not any concern of yours when you hold on to that item that is the proven 5,000-year track history of being able to retain that value going into the future, and there's really nothing else like it. So once you have that in your hand, it really starts to change the way that you feel and look at the entire world itself. All right, buy around a week. Yeah, if you can, buy around a week. Dollar cost average from now on. Next stream, when? Oh, Pedro Diaz? I don't know. If you want to join in tomorrow, we're going to do a members only live stream. That's probably going to go for a while. I may end up actually doing two of them. We're going to be breaking down the Federal Reserve speeches. One of them has come from Bowman. The other one is Myron's, or we may do Powell's. But definitely we're going to break down Michelle Bowman's speech. I figure that one's probably going to be the one that we really want to get into. So that'll happen sometime in the morning. I'm guessing 8, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, specific time over here on the West Coast. We'll start that members only live stream. I don't know if I'm going to do a regular, public live stream tomorrow. If that was to happen, it would probably happen later on in the afternoon. But then definitely Monday at lunch, you know me, Monday, 11 o'clock, a little after 11 on the West Coast time. That's when I start my afternoon live streams, and they usually go for about 45 minutes or so. So we can look for you there. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.